The air in the dungeons of King's Landing was thick with the stench of blood and rot. Ned Stark sat slumped against the cold stone wall, hands trembling, but not from fear, no, from rage and betrayal. He had been ready to die, to confess to lies for the sake of Sansa's life. He was prepared to lose his honor if it meant his daughters could live. But as the crowd roared outside, and the executioner sharpened his blade, something shifted. Varys stood in the shadows, his eyes unusually sharp. "Lord Stark," he whispered quickly, "there is still another way. Do you trust me?" Ned had no reason to trust the spider, but he nodded. What choice did he have? The next thing he remembered was being dragged through underground tunnels. A hood over his face, his body aching. He thought they were taking him to his death. But when the hood came off, he was on a ship. The wind smelled like salt and freedom. And across the narrow sea, Braavos awaited. Weeks passed before Ned could believe he was truly alive. He kept his head down, his beard grown out, his name buried deep. It was Varys who arranged it. All his death had been staged. The head on. The spike had been someone else's. Magic, money, and misdirection had done the rest. But in Braavos, freedom came with a price. He found himself standing before the doors of the House of Black and White. He had heard of the Faceless men, assassins who served the many-faced god. Here, they told him, a man could lose his past and be born anew. That was exactly what Ned Stark needed. The North believed him dead, his family broken, his name disgraced. Perhaps, if he became no one, he could someday return not as a lord, but as something stronger, something unseen. The training was brutal. The waif, a girl with eyes full of cruelty, beat him senseless during sparring. Jaqen Hgar, calm and cryptic, spoke in riddles. They stripped Ned of his name, his clothes, his thoughts. He was no longer a father, no longer a lord, no longer even a man with a cause, just a vessel. But Ned never fully let go. He saw Arya in the waif's stubbornness, Sansa in the way the young acolytes clung to hope. Every time he put on a new face, learned a new language, or killed on command, he reminded himself this was for them, for Winterfell, for justice, not revenge. Then one day he received a mission, a target in Penmatos, a merchant who trafficked in slaves, protected by gold and power. But when Ned arrived, he recognized the voice whispering in the Alialerio Mopatis, the same man who once conspired with Varys to place Viserys and Daenerys on the throne, the same man who likely knew truths about Jon Arryn's death, about Robert's downfall, and maybe even about who betrayed him in King's Landing. Ned was torn. He was supposed to be no one, but memories returned like a rising tide. He waited until nightfall, blade in hand, wearing the face of a beggar. When Illyrio came out with his guards, laughing, Ned moved like a shadow. The knife slid across Illyrio's throat before the guards could react. He vanished into the night, leaving only whispers in his wake. Back at the House of Black and White, they knew. The many-faced god demanded balance, and Ned had taken a life for personal justice, not divine will. He was punished, starved, beaten, thrown into a dark cell to meditate on what it meant to be no one. But Ned Stark was never meant to be no one. He was always someone, a father, a wolf. And now, something else entirely, a ghost of the North, trained in the art of death, waiting for the right moment to return. Winter had a different feel in Braavos. It didn't bite the skin the way it did in Winterfell, but it had a chill that crept into the bones. Ned sat on the stone steps of a narrow alley near the docks, watching faceless silhouettes move through the mist. Sailors shouted, prostitutes laughed, and children begged all shadows of lives he no longer lived. He was supposed to be no one, but the longer he stayed in Braavos, the louder his memories became. Jack and Achigar approached him one morning, silent as the mist itself. "A man must choose," he said softly. "A man has broken the rules. A man owes a debt." Ned looked up, eyes weary. "Then take my life. But no, this my death won't make me no one. It will make me a martyr in my own mind." Jackin didn't blink. A man does not need to die, but a man cannot stay. The many-faced God does not forgive sentiment. They exiled him that same day. No ceremony, no blade, just a command. Go, and do not return. Ned left with nothing but a coin and a facer. Gift, one final face, blank and smooth, tucked inside a leather pouch. A reminder of what he had been trained to do. He traveled south, posing as a healer, then a sellsword, then a merchant. Each mask let him slip through cities and rumors unnoticed. But one night, in a smoky tavern outside Mir, he heard a name that stopped him cold. "Arya Stark. She's in Braavos," a gruff voice said, "training with them bloody ghost men. You know, the ones who change faces." Ned's heart skipped. Arya, his little girl, alive, in Braavos where he had just been, for the first time in years. Ned moved with urgency. He rode fast, stole gold when he had to, and by the time he returned to Braavos, he was no longer the man they had banished. He was a father, chasing blood, but Arya had already left. The House of Black and White had let her go, too. Some said she'd killed the waif and disappeared. Others claimed she took a face with her and now wandered the world as death itself. Ned searched for weeks, but the city had swallowed her. Still, something inside him changed. He wasn't just chasing ghosts anymore. He was becoming one. He took small contracts under different names. A corrupt lord in Lys, a pirate captain in Volantis, always striking in silence, always watching for signs of the war back home. And slowly, whispers began to stir. A faceless killer who only took noble blood, one who never asked for coin, only names. The nobles feared him, the poor praised him. They called him the Northern Ghost. Years passed. He heard tales of Robb's fall, of murder, of the Boltons holding Winterfell. Each word cut like a blade. Then came the tale of Jon Snow, his bastardizing from death, leading the Night's Watch, then being named king in the north. Ned could hardly breathe. He wanted to go back, to reveal himself, to stand beside his son. But his mind wrestled with guilt. If they knew he lived, would it undo everything Jon had built? Would the North trust a ghost over a king? Still, he journeyed west, crossing mountains and rivers, shadows and storms, until, one day, he reached the neck. He stood there, for hours, staring at the land he had once ruled, now lost to time and war. Winterfell loomed ahead, changed, scarred, but standing. He didn't go inside. Not yet. Instead, he found an old abandoned tower near the edge of the woods. From there, he watched the comings and goings of the castle, memorizing the faces. Some Brienne, Davos, and finally, Jon, his son, alive, strong, a Stark in every way but name. And yet, as Ned watched, he felt something he hadn't in years. Hope, but hope, in Westeros, was always short-lived. That night, As cold wind rattled through the trees, Ned Stark watched from the shadows as Jon Snow walked the ramparts of Winterfell. His posture was strong, but his face was tired, haunted. Even war had aged the boy. Ned wanted to call out, to let him know his father was alive, that he was proud of him, but the words stuck in his throat. What if Jon hated him for the lie? For never telling him the truth about his mother? For leaving him to fight alone? He couldn't face him, not yet. So Ned stayed hidden in the woods beyond the walls, his little camp tucked beneath roots and stone. Every day he watched. Every night he wondered if he'd ever find the right moment. But Westeros was not a place that waited. One morning, the ravens came. Jon called a meeting in the great hall, and from where Ned crouched on a ledge outside, he could hear bits and pieces. Whispers of Daenerys Targaryen, of dragons, of an army of the dead marching south, and worst of all, of spies within the north. They say someone's killing lords aligned with the queen, Braavos said grimly, one by one, silent as a shadow. Jon's face darkened. The northern ghost, he muttered. Ned froze. Sansa leaned forward. You believe it's real? Jon didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, if it is, he's not our enemy. Not yet. The words cut deeper than a sword. His son suspected the truth, maybe not consciously, but some part of him knew. That night, Ned did something he hadn't done in years. He carved the sigil of House Stark into a tree near his camp. A wolf, deep, strong, proud, a signal, a message, maybe a trap. The next morning, the snow around the tree was disturbed. Footsteps, just one pair. Someone had seen it. Later that day, a hooded figure stood at the edge of the woods, just near enough for Ned to make out her face. Arya. His daughter. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood still, staring at the carving in the tree like it was a ghost. Ned stepped into view slowly, his face hidden behind a plain mask. Not one from Braavos, just cloth and shadow. Arya didn't flinch. She tilted her head, narrowed her eyes. You're him, she said. The ghost. He stayed silent. I've seen you watching. I knew it couldn't be someone from the east. The way you walk, the way you move. It's Northman training. Old, still, silence. Arya took a step closer. Take it off. Ned hesitated. His hands shook as he reached up and pulled the cloth down. Arya stared, her breath hitched. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, years of pain and memory crashing between them like a storm. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She simply said, You're supposed to be dead. I was, he said quietly, in all the ways that mattered. They sat beneath the tree, father and daughter, not as warriors or ghosts, but just broken souls trying to understand each other. Ned told her everything. How Varys saved him, how Braavos shaped him, how he had watched them all from the shadows. Arya listened without judgment. Then she said something that shook him. Jon knows, maybe not with his mind, but with his heart. Ned looked away. He thinks I abandoned him. No, she said. He thinks you did what you had to. We all did. But peace would not last. A raven arrived that night. Arya read the message aloud in a cold voice. King's Landing has fallen to Daenerys. The Red Keep is ash. Cersei is dead. Ned stood up. Then war isn't over. It's just changed faces. And now he had a decision to make. Return to the shadows, or walk into Winterfell and face the truth. The gates of Winterfell groaned as they opened under a pale sky. Snow fell in quiet sheets, softening the sharp lines of the castle Ned once called home. He walked through the main courtyard, flanked by Arya on one side and Silence on the other. Every step echoed with Ghost's Benjen, training him with a wooden sword, young Robb chasing Rickon, Catelyn watching from the balcony. Memories haunted every stone. The guards didn't stop him. Arya had warned them. Still, murmurs spread like wildfire. Faces turned, mouths fell open. Some whispered his name in disbelief. Others simply stared. It wasn't until he entered the great hall that the weight of it hit. Jon stood at the far end, tall and cloaked in black. His eyes locked onto Ned the second he stepped into the firelight. The room emptied of sound. Sansa rose from her seat, her mouth trembling. "You're not," she started, voice shaking. "You can't be." Jon stepped forward. "Tell me this isn't a trick." Ned pulled back the hood. Jon's breath caught. "You're alive." "I should have died," Ned said. "I did die, in a way, but I couldn't stay dead. Not while my children lived." Jon's jaw tightened. "You let us think you were gone. Let Robb fight alone. Let me carry your burden." "I know," Ned said, "and I'll never be able to make it right." The silence that followed felt eternal. Sansa stepped forward slowly, unsure, and then suddenly she hugged him. Tightly, desperately. Arya joined her. Then Jon, there were no words left. Just tears. For a moment, it felt like the Starks were whole again. But joy in Westeros never lasts. Later that night, in a smaller war room lit by torchlight, Ned sat with them all. They told him everything. The war against the Night King. The fall of Daenerys into madness. Tyrion's betrayal. The fire that consumed the Red Keep. The North's fragile independence. Jon looked at him, wary. "What do you believe now, father? Do you still follow honor or vengeance?" Ned met his eyes. "I follow survival. Not for me, but for us. For the blood that's left." Sansa spoke, her voice laced with steel. "And what do you want?" Ned looked at her, so strong, so wise now. "I want to protect you. That's all I've ever wanted." "But there's more," Arya said, leaning forward. "Tell them." Ned hesitated, then spoke the name that had haunted him for decades. Rhaegar Targaryen, Lyanna, Jon's true parents. The room froze. Sansa paled. Jon didn't move. "I lied to protect him," Ned said. "And in doing so, I broke everything I stood for." Jon shook his head slowly. "No, you saved me. You gave me a chance." Sansa's voice was like ice. "If people know, the realm will rise against him again. They'll see him as a threat." "They already do," Arya said. "But now he has us, all of us." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Then a knock came at the door. A scout entered, cloak soaked with snow. A ship from Dragonstone arrived at White Harbor. Under Targaryen banners, everyone stood. "Who's aboard?" Jon asked. The scout bowed his head. Tyrion Lannister and Bran the Broken. Ned's eyes widened. Bran, his boy alive, changed. Jon looked at him with a hard stare. "What will you do when you see what your son has become?" "I'll listen," Ned said. "For once, I'll listen." But deep down, Ned Stark knew the war for the realm wasn't over. It was just taking a new shape, one full of broken kings, forgotten ghosts, and a family bound by blood, lies, and the price of survival. The snow fell harder as they rowed south toward White Harbor. The banners of House Stark fluttered in the wind, flanked by cautious guards and quiet riders. Ned rode near Jon, neither speaking much. Too much had been said, too much remained unspoken. White harbour loomed ahead, ships docked and sails drenched with sleet. When they arrived, Tyrion Lannister stood waiting on the pier, hands bound in front of him. Behind him, a wheeled chair carved of dark wood, sat motionless Bran. Ned's breath caught. His son looked older, stranger, eyes pale and distant. There was no warmth in them, only stillness. "Lord Stark," Tyrion said with a crooked smile, "back from the dead, I see. Your family has a habit of that." Jon stepped forward. "What are you doing here?" Tyrion bowed slightly, delivering a message and a warning. He gestured behind him. Bran's voice was soft but deep, almost detached. The wheel was broken, but the pieces still move. Ned approached slowly, staring into the boy's unreadable face. "Bran, do you remember who I am?" Bran tilted his head. "You were my father, but I am no longer your son." The words hit harder than a blade. Tyrion stepped between them. He's seen too much. Time, memory, future. He sees the realm as it is, and what it might become. Jon narrowed his eyes. And what does he see now? Bran's gaze turned toward him. The last war, fire, ice, a final reckoning. Sansa scoffed. "We've had our final war. Daenerys is gone." "No," Bran said calmly. "She was only the beginning." Tyrion nodded. "A new Targaryen fleet sails from Essos, loyalists, mercenaries. The remnants of her followers believe Jon is the last dragon, and they mean to place him on the Iron Throne, whether he wants it or not." Ned's voice was low. "That throne destroyed everything." Bran's eyes didn't waver. "And yet the world will always build another." A heavy silence followed. Snow clung to Ned's beard. He looked around at the faces of his children, so different, so hardened. War had touched them all, left none unscarred. "What do we do?" Arya asked finally. Bran looked at her. "You survive. You stay in the north, and you prepare, because fire is coming again." Jon clenched his jaw. "I'm not a king. I don't want it." "Then you'd be the best one," Tyrion said, with the faintest hint of regret. Later that night, Ned stood alone on the battlements, overlooking the icy sea. Tyrion joined him. "Strange world," Tyrion said, sipping a flask. "The Honorable Ned Stark, back from the grave, breaking rules and slitting throats." Ned didn't respond. "Do you regret it?" Tyrion asked, living, watching them suffer, without stepping in. Ned exhaled, the fog of his breath mingling with the snow, every day. "But if I hadn't, they wouldn't be alive now. Jon, Sansa, Arya, Ivan, Bran." Tyrion leaned on the wall beside him. "And what about you? What will you be in the wars to come?" Ned looked out into the dark horizon. Not a hero, not a lord, just a man. One last time, Tyrion raised a brow. "For what?" "For winter fell. The final snow of that long winter came early and heavy, blanketing Winterfell in white silence. In the crypts beneath the castle, Ned Stark stood before the statue of himself, the cold stone likeness carved after his death. It looked noble, stern, distant. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "I wasn't half as wise as they think," he muttered. Footsteps echoed behind. Him, Jon, Sansa, Arya, Bran, all four of his children stood with him in the shadow of his false grave, bound not just by blood, but by the weight of what was coming. Bran spoke first. "They're 3 weeks out. 10 ships, 2 dragons. Her followers call themselves the Ashburn. They wear black and gold, and they chant your name, John. John shook his head. They're chasing a ghost. I want no part of it. You may not, Sansa said coldly, but they do, and they'll burn everything to make it true. Ned turned to his children. Then we have to act, quietly, before war reaches our gates. Arya smirked. What are you thinking, father? He paused, looking at her with the faintest smile. Faceless men taught me one thing. Death wears many skins. The plan they formed was bold and sane even, but it was the only way. John would disappear into the north, vanish from every eye. Let the Ashburns search for a king that didn't want the crown. Meanwhile, Ned would wear John's face for one final performance. He hadn't used a face since Braavos. It burned when he applied. Magic, pain, memory. When it was done, he looked in the mirror, and John Stark stared back. His eyes, his hair, even his voice. But older, war-weary, as the Ashburn expected their savior to be. Arya handled the infiltration. One by one, they sent ravens bearing John's reply. Come to Winterfell. Pledge your loyalty to the north. Peace is our path. It was bait, the kind only zealots would swallow, when the fleet landed near the western coast. Ned wearing John's face rode to meet them. The sight was sickening. Fanatics with black cloaks and twisted gold dragon pins. 2 dragons circled above, smaller than Daenerys's had been, but deadly all the same. The soldiers knelt before him, murmuring Aegon, the blood of fire and ice. Ned played the role, quiet, noble, grim. He told them Winterfell was ready to kneel to no crown. If they sought peace, they must leave the dragons and disband. If they refused, they would find only death. Their leader, a woman calling herself Selva Storm, sneered. We came for fire, not words. That night, Ned returned to Winterfell. Arya had already moved. One by one, in the dead of night, she and a dozen trained killers picked off their commanders. Cutthroats, poisoned wine, rigged fires. Sansa had ensured the supplies were sabotaged. Bran sent crows to confuse the dragons. When the Ashburn awoke to the sound of their beasts screaming, it was too late. Winterfell didn't open its gates. It burned their camp from the inside. Ned stood on the hill above it all, still wearing John's face, watching the army that came to crown his son dissolve into panic and blood. But it wasn't just war they destroyed. It was myth the next day. The real John stood before a crowd of northern lords. He declared his loyalty to the north, to Winterfell, to peace. Then he stepped back, and Ned Stark, stripped of faces, stripped of lies, stepped forward. I am not a ghost, he said, but I am a man who once failed this kingdom by being too honorable, too silent, and too slow. He paused, eyes scanning every face. I won't make that mistake again. From that day forward, Ned lived not as a lord, not as a king, but as the silent protector of the north. The realm believed he was dead, and that was fine by him. Ghosts move freely in the dark. He walked the battlements at night, taught sons how to hold a sword, mended broken walls with his own hands. No title, no glory, just a man. Winterfell had its king in John, but in the shadows, behind every closed gate, every silent footstep in the snow, there was the northern ghost watching, guarding, never seen again.